Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for February 25, 2024. We're talking with Sergei Melkonian. Hello, Sergei. Welcome back.
Ողջույն, Sergei.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being on the show. Well, French-Armenian relations were in the spotlight this past week. On February 21, the French government held a historic ceremony where the remains of Missak Manouchian and his wife Meline were interred in the Pantheon in Paris. Manouchian was an Armenian genocide survivor who, during the Second World War, joined the French resistance and led a number of daring operations that liquidated more than 100 Nazis. This is a pretty big honor. Manouchian is now in the company of great Frenchmen like Voltaire, Rousseau, Marie Curie, Alexandre Dumas, and others. The event was covered widely in the French press, and Pashinyan was invited and attended. The day before the Manouchian ceremony, France's Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu paid a visit to Armenia. This was a rather ceremonious trip. Lecornu confirmed that just the night before, Armenia had received a shipment of French night vision equipment. He also promised that soon they will also deliver air defense radar systems and more of the Bastion APCs, the armored personnel carriers that Armenia had ordered last year. The French also promised training for the weapons and joint military exercises with Armenia. Sergei, obviously, we are very proud of our French-Armenian compatriots. Still, 80 years have passed since World War II, essentially, and it would be natural to ask, why did the French government decide to rebury and honor Missak Manouchian now?
I think this is not just a symbolic gesture, as it was many times before. I mean, not only in Armenia-French relations, but also in Armenia, some other European countries, and Russia. This is more than a symbolic gesture because France shows that they see Armenia as a not only maybe natural ally, but they value the Armenian investment in French history, in French future, and they paid a huge attention on that. And obviously, it was used as an opportunity to have, again, a high-level, very warm visit. Because, for example, for me, it's complicated to remind some same visits, some same meetings between Armenian officials and Russian officials in such warm atmosphere and very symbolic. But the French, our French counterparts, they organized a really high-level warm visit and demonstrated their political will to stand with Armenia in this really complicated period for our history.
How would you say that the Russians are viewing these events? Specifically, how would you say that Russia is reacting to the French weapon deliveries?
We have the first reaction when French bastions came first time. And that time there was a quite tough reaction from Russians, because from their perception, South Caucasus and all post-Soviet space in general may become one day a battlefield between Russia and the West. And in order to avoid such developments, they they're not trying, but they want to prevent any Western infiltration in the post-Soviet space. From their perspective, if Western countries, French, that has not only just making money, like selling weapons, because weapons, in many cases, it's more about money rather than some political stuff. There are some political ambitions to have their foothold in the South Caucasus. And from Russian perspective, these French steps are part of all collective Western steps aimed against the Russian interest in the South Caucasus especially. Because what does it mean? If you supply weapon or some military munition, you should also send some officers or at least some instructors to conduct some trainings for Armenian military. And we have statements that, yes, France will soon appoint some instructors to prepare Armenian military staff.
Yeah,
At the
that's
same
right.
time, we have newly appointed military attaché last year. So we see like the developments step by step. French engagement in Armenian security architecture increased. At the same time, this is one trend that we have. We have the second trend that is going parallel. Russian engagement in Armenian security architecture is decreasing. It's related not only Russian ability to supply the weapon in time that there was extremely needing such weapon, and also the rhetoric about Armenian membership in CSTO. It's about rhetoric of Russian border troops in Zvart nodes, etc., etc. So, and these are two parallel trends. And the best indicator of it, for example, Armenian decision to accept EU monitoring mission rather than CSTO mission. So that was a first signal for Russia that Armenia may choose the Western option rather than Russian option.
Would you say that Iran is uneasy about these weapons the same as Russia, especially the radar systems that have been talked about? Do they worry that there's going to be a NATO eye on the border of Iran?
From Iranian perspective, the only red line is a permanent Western presence. Until there is not permanent Western military presence close to Iranian border, this is not a red line. But obviously, we have statements from Iran about EU mission that they are not happy with that. We heard statements from Iranian officials, both from Iran and from Yerevan, that Western engagement is also not so acceptable for Iran. But Iran is not ready to do any tough steps. The only problem that we may have with Iran in this case is the Iranian attempts to not block, but at least make some obstacles in transit of our military munition and weapon from India via Iranian territory. So we have such problems in Iran, to be honest. And this is why, I mean, this is one of the most important points on our bilateral agenda, because all weapon that we are getting from India is passing Iranian territory, and this is the only way how we can get Indian weapon. And the problem is that Armenia buys weapon from India, Armenia buys weapon from France, but we do not agree, like in all list that Iranians put on the table. It's related to not only about weapon and some military munition procurement. It's related also to some security guarantees. It's related to joint military drills, etc., etc. I mean, there is a wide list of security-related points that Iranians are putting on the agenda, but Armenia is refusing all of them. And from Iranian perspective, okay, why in this case I should facilitate your attempts to build some security ties with other countries when you are not, at least do not have political will to do at least something with me.
Yeah. Sergei, just a quick question on secrecy of weapons deliveries. About a month back, when there was news that the Russians were delivering the weapons purchase that Armenia has had on the books for some years, the Armenian parliament passed legislation that weapons acquisitions, deliveries, and so on would henceforth be classified as state secrets. So I'm wondering, what is your view on this issue? Because just reading state media on the French weaponry, they were public about them, almost specifying the hours of the deliveries and the type of equipment. I mean, you can't track your Amazon package with more clarity. Meanwhile, we have very little to go on as to what has been delivered from the Russian side, except that, quote, it is mostly complete, unquote. So what acquisitions are secret and which ones are not? And who is deciding this? And is this driven by security concerns or are these political decisions?
To be honest, it's more like a political game. I will explain. For example, we got first part of our bastions and we got it like photo shows that everyone has saw that, how they are coming from Georgia or Black Sea to Georgia, then to Armenia. These are just armed vehicles. So there is nothing like, this is not HIMARS or some other like high quality weapon. Just military vehicles, armed vehicles, and that's it. So there is nothing special. But we do not know anything about Russians' military supply. But as far as we know, and that's for sure because I asked this question to Russian officials and to Russian experts, and they confirmed that yes, almost all problems are solved. Part of weapon, it was already supplied to Armenia, another part will be supplied. And there is a last part. There are some, I mean, the third one, there are some agreements how we are going to deal with it. So almost all problems in this case are solved. But the same, for example, case we have with India. When in India media we have any statements that, according to our information, one India company is ready to supply some new weapon to unnamed country. And this statement is spreading by all Armenian government-affiliated media. And they're trying to demonstrate that we are this unnamed country. And this is the problem. It means like your enemy knows everything about your military procurement. At the same time, we do not know anything real about Azerbaijan military procurement. Starting from this year, there were 4 cargo flights from Israel to Azerbaijan with military munitions. There were several flights from Turkey and several flights from some European countries. And we have zero information. At the same time, Azeris have like all information about the weapon that is coming from India, is coming from France. Obviously, this is a problem for our security.
Sergei, not official, but there were also reports that Pashinyan and Macron signed an intelligence sharing deal between France's Directorate General for External Security and Armenia's newly founded External Intelligence Agency. A so-called citizen journalist site, Agravox, which seems to be pretty reputable in its category, reported that, as well as Pashinyan's own Հայկական Ժամանակ, which then promptly also deleted this news. So what is known about this deal, considering Pashinyan's intrigue-laden appearances with CIA directors, MI6 directors, and now, I guess, the French intelligence agency? Do you know anything more specific about what type of information will be shared between Armenia and France?
Officially, Armenia has stated that such statement has nothing with reality. POAC officially stated that this is a fake news. I cannot confirm this information, but I know from my sources that some Western countries indirectly were involved in creating this new security service. Because what was the point they were explaining? The problem is that ruling party, especially Pashinyan, they do not trust the current security services because most of them passed through Soviet/Russian school. Now they're making parallel structure that is more connected with the West. So I'll be not surprised when all high-level Armenian officials, including not only Nikol Pashinyan, but also the head of Security Council, they met with the head of security services. And again, we have zero information about the content, zero statements. And the problem is we have such statements, such developments in parallel when Armenia officially states that it's freezing its membership in CSTO. Because what does it mean? In CSTO, there is also an exchange of intelligence information. So it means that in this case, we are freezing our cooperation with Russia and we're developing cooperation with the West. So this is not about diversification. This is about U-turn indicator.
Right. That was going to be my next question. Given what we're seeing, and let's give credit that it's true, maybe it's not, but let's say that France shares all their satellite imagery about our borders. Let's say that they also share intelligence about potential Azerbaijani moves. Are all these deals, are all the potential benefits, and also I think we can exclude that France will send soldiers to Armenia to fight for us, but are all the potential benefits of cooperation with the West enough to offset what we appear to be doing, which is alienating Russia and also potentially Iran?
This is the biggest problem in this U-turn strategy. The problem is no one is ready to provide any security guarantees, zero countries. I mean, EU and US. They are very frank in private discussion because they stated literally, we are not ready to provide any security guarantees. You can see what's going on in Ukraine. We are ready to provide some financial support. We are ready to provide some military aid, and that's it. But it does not mean that will provide the same assistance to Armenia that we are providing to Ukraine. It's clear because Ukraine is fighting against Russia. Armenia is not fighting against Russia. But until Armenia is making anti-Russian sentiments or anti-Russian steps, Armenia may have some expectations of Western support, but it doesn't mean that we will get such support. And as you mentioned, that may lead to deterioration of our relations with Russia and with Iran, the two countries that somehow are able to keep the regional balance. And the problem is if Russia and Iran are leaving this region, Turkey will try to fill this security vacuum. I cannot imagine what might be the next step, but from Azerbaijani perspective and from Turkish perspective, historic window of opportunity again to attack Armenia. Why? Because obviously, if Armenia is making U-turn, Russia will not have any political will to support pro-Western Armenia. The same is with Iran. If Iran see that Armenia is bringing West to the region, why Iran should care about Armenian Sunni? Iran will care more about Iranian Sunni. This is the problem. And it's complicated to have consensus outside the region because at the same time, key regional powers outlining and designing the balance.
Sergei, one quick question about this intelligence sharing. I'm sorry to interrupt. Does sharing of intelligence between Armenia and France and potentially NATO also mean that Turkey will have essentially information about all of Armenia's moves?
I'm not sure because that might be some bilateral agreement, because maybe bilateral sharing does not mean like multilateral, I mean, in case of NATO. And I'm not sure that the problem is for me, I see that current Armenia that we have will not do anything against Turkey. Coming from intelligence information exchange to real steps to deter somehow Turkey. Armenia is doing everything what Turkey wants, like literally everything. Starting from NK to constitution, to enclaves, to our books on Armenian history, etc., etc. Like all the list, all the shopping list. This is why this discourse that Armenia is cooperating with France in order to deter Turkey, no. Armenia is ready to become more part of Turkish zone influence rather than Russian zone of influence. And that's true. And rather than Iranian zone of influence. Because, for example, Armenia accepted EU mission, but Armenia does not accept any cooperation with Iran in this case. Armenia does not accept any cooperation with Russia in this case. But Armenia is waiting for years Turkey to open the border. This is the problem. This is why I don't think that Armenia is ready to deter somehow Turkey.
All right, now to the drama. While in Paris, Pashinyan gave an interview to France 24. We'll skip the part of the interview where he praises Manouchian, a fighter against Nazi occupation regime in France. Although we do ask, what would Manouchian do if he found himself in Armenia facing a Turkish occupation regime? But anyway, Pashinyan, as always, made several controversial statements about geopolitics. First, when asked about the Ukraine conflict, for the second time in a week, he reiterated that on the matter of the Ukraine war, Armenia and Russia were not allies. He went further by saying that Russia is violating Ukraine's territorial integrity, defined by the Alma Ata declaration. And lastly, he said that Armenia has frozen its participation in the CSTO alliance, a claim that was later denied by the CSTO, who said that they never received a request from Armenia to freeze its participation. And also, CSTO and Russian officials said that there is no such clause in the CSTO treaty about freezing of anything. So it's not physically possible. To add insult to injury, we learned that Vladimir Zelensky is planning a visit to Armenia in March. This is unconfirmed yet officially, but several high-profile, both Armenian and Ukrainian media have reported it, and it is being reported widely as actual fact. Other sources reported that Zelensky will also be visiting Baku. With the exception of the Baltic countries, no post-Soviet country has hosted Zelensky on its soil since the beginning of the war. So this is a pretty big deal and will certainly raise the ire of Putin. On the other hand, we also reported last week that Armenian authorities are not ruling out their intention to arrest Putin. So on one hand, they're inviting Zelensky. On the other hand, they're making passive threats to the Russian president. We can talk more about the details about Russian-Armenian relations. And in fact, we have a subsequent question about this. But what on earth could Pashinyan's goal be in these unnecessary and provocative statements, including hosting Russia's #1 enemy on Armenian soil?
Thank you. Let me disagree a bit with you, Hovik, because these statements are not controversial. They're straight, so straight, because there is continuity in such statements. Okay, what happened? In the capital of NATO member country, Armenia stated that Armenia is freezing its membership in CSTO. Like, this is in fact what happened. But the problem is, Nicole just officially stated what already has happened. Armenia does not take part in military drills. Armenia does not take part in discussions, etc., etc. The problem is Armenia did not agree and did not disagree with all decisions made during the last CSTO meeting in Minsk in the end of December. So until Armenia did not sign anything, it means that Armenia creates obstacles in CSTO functioning mechanism. If previously Armenia just abstained, now Armenia may become an obstacle. The problem is, as far as I understand, as Nicole stated, that just, okay, he just stamped the fact that already happened. And you were right, there is no any procedure of freezing its membership. As I understand, from Nicole's perspective, he's trying to demonstrate to the West that I'm doing something. Because previously, Western colleagues stated that, okay, Armenia is doing just statements and nothing, there are zero real steps against Russia, only statements. Now, Nicole stated that we are freezing our membership in CSTO. So this is a step. This is not only statement. And as I understand, they have some expectations, as I mentioned, to get some Western support in this case, because West will support Armenia, as I understand, until Armenia is ready to conduct anti-Russian steps. Not only statements, I mean steps. This is why, for example, since the last week, we are discussing the issue of Russian border troops in Zvartnots, and Alain Simonian today stated that there is no need in such troops in Zvartnots, etc. So this is a part of Armenian discourse, internal discourse. So Armenia, I mean, Nicole is waiting for some Western support in this case. What's about Zelensky's visit? The problem is that we already had such experience when the symbol of anti-Russian struggle has already visited Armenia. I'm talking about Saakashvili. After the Georgia-Russian war in 2008, when Saakashvili visited Armenia. Saakashvili at that time, like Zelensky today. But the problem is, there was a political explanation why did Armenia did such thing that time, because there was a need to get a neutral Georgia to provide a transit route to weapon from Europe to Armenia. So there was a need to have an airspace. And second point, President that time, I mean, Sargsyan, he was able to call, or at least to meet with Putin and explain the necessity for such step. Today, there is no real political need to bring Zelensky to Armenia. Second, no one will try to explain its counterpart why we are doing such stuff. And as you mentioned, Zelensky may visit Armenia, Zelensky may visit Azerbaijan, but the problem is, well, Zelensky is not going to visit Georgia. Georgia, that got a candidate status in EU. Georgia is #1 US partner in the region, but Zelensky is not coming to Georgia because Georgians are much more smarter rather than current Armenia, because they understand that they are benefit from this Russia-West confrontation, their economy increase, etc., etc. And this is, I mean, this is the part of Western package of, are you ready to make a U-turn towards the West? Okay, Zelensky is a part of our package. What Zelensky may do for Armenia, because obviously we cannot get any weapon, any military munition, any support, like not zero. That's impossible to get something from Ukraine today. There are some points that we may get somehow. First is Zelensky attempt to bring Aliyev to Brussels. Aliyev is still rejecting the EU and the United States negotiation platform. And if Zelensky will succeed to bring Aliyev back, we may be able to get something from Azerbaijan. Why? Because we gave Aliyev, what did he want? Everything in EU platform. NK, enclaves, communication, etc., etc., etc. But we didn't get anything. And if he brings to the meeting in Brussels, we have an opportunity at least to get something. The second point, as far as I understand from Nicole's perspective, Zelensky may somehow lobby Armenian agenda in EU. make like more steps. As Nicole stated, we are ready to be so close with the EU as EU thinks we are able to be, etc. So Zelensky may bring EU closer to Armenia from Nicole's perspective, as I understand. Coming to Nicole's statement about we are not Russian ally, etc. Azerbaijan stated that Azerbaijan is recognizing Ukrainian territorial integrity. So they did not target Russia. And this principle is based on their principle. I mean, they explained that, okay, we focus more on territorial integrity rather than self-determination because we had an NK problem, etc., etc. Now, Armenia also was able to state that, okay, we recognize Ukrainian territorial integrity, and this is fine for Russia. I mean, Russians have, Azerbaijan did such statement, Kazakhstan did such statement, and other stan states, and Russia is fine with that. But when you are targeting a Russian, like stating that I am not Russian ally, this is a problem. Why? Because when you state that I'm not Russian ally in this case, it means you are trying to be some neutral country. Like I'm not with Russia, I'm not with the West or Ukraine. But the problem is when you state I'm not Russian ally. At the same time, you bring Zelensky to Armenia, you demonstrate that you are more in favor to Ukraine than Russia. So you are not neutral in this case. You are ready to support more this country because Armenia supplied humanitarian aid. Yes, so limited comparing what Azerbaijan is doing. And Armenia supplied, like, I didn't hear anything about Armenian humanitarian aid to Donbas people or some, I don't know, even Armenians who are fighting from Russian side, etc., etc. So it means that you demonstrate that I'm with Ukraine. So I'm not neutral in this case.
Is he trying to pretend that he's making some kind of internally consistent, logically consistent argument with respect to the 1991 Alma Ata agreement? That if he's going to respect it for Azerbaijan and Armenia, he's also trying to respect it for Russia and Ukraine.
The problem is the so-called Alma Ata declaration is not relevant also for Armenia because Azerbaijan has violated this Alma Ata declaration. Azerbaijan is keeping until today under occupation 220 square kilometers, like Yerevan. So Azerbaijan is keeping occupied Yerevan, but in different parts of Armenia-Azerbaijan border.
Yes.
So this Alma Ata declaration is not relevant for us. Why Nicole is promoting this Alma Ata declaration for other countries?
Right. And yeah, you can recognize territorial integrity at a high level without specifically saying that, which part specifically is, is within one country or another. And I believe that Azerbaijan is using this very wisely while Pashinyan is helping Azerbaijan use it very wisely.
But the problem is Azerbaijan has never stated, Aliyev has never stated that he's recognizing Armenian territorial integrity, 29.8 thousand square kilometers. So Azerbaijan is not recognizing current Armenian territorial integrity. So Alma Ata declaration is nothing.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the same position as Russia in terms of Donbass and all the other states. They're saying, we have no problem with Ukrainian territorial integrity, except that we don't recognize Donbass and all the other republics. So, Sergei, let's move on. On Saturday, February 24, there was a major discussion between Russian and Armenian experts on the state of relations between the two countries. You were part of that group, and your colleagues from the Armenian project were also in attendance. We shared the link in the show notes. I can say it was an interesting discussion from my perspective, but I wanted to get your overall impression on the level of the dialogue. Was it friendly? Was it not friendly? And what was the overall takeaway from Armenian experts on this discussion?
That was friendly, that was tough, and that was very frank. They explained their perspective on the process that are going on, and maybe they didn't use the right wording or correct, not right, correct wording. And the point that was spread it like in second in Armenian media was done by one Russian scholars. He stated that deterioration of relations between Armenia and Russia will bring territorial losses for Armenia. So some my colleagues from Armenia understand like this is a direct threat. If you guys move to the west, you will lose like territories. But as far as I understand, because the discussion was continuing, like that was not like just one quote. They were explaining, okay, you You do not want to have Russian security guarantees. Maybe they're not the best one, but this is the only option that you have. You rely on Western guarantees that will not work because Western countries has signed a security guarantees agreement with Ukraine, like UK, like Italy, like other countries, and they're not providing these security guarantees. There are zero obligations. At the same time, yes, Azerbaijan will see that the security balance is changing in favor for Azerbaijan and Turkey, and they will attack you. And we will not provide that support that we, for example, at least provided during 2020 war, because Russia was the only country that supplied weapon. Who will supply weapon? Who will be able to stop Azerbaijan at least from the fifth attempt? No one will do it. So make an analysis based on cost and benefit, and that's it. The tough part was more on dialect level, because I was the first to ask the question about perception and misperception, because they got really misperception of the situation that is going here in the South Caucasus. I will explain. I was asking about the red lines, because I met the same experts before a year ago, and they were stating that ethnic cleansing in NK, like Serbsky Krajina scenario, is a red line for Russia. At the same time, in another expert's book, that was mentioned literally the same. Russian peacekeepers in NK prevented the Serbsky Krajina scenario. So as far as I understand, that was a mindset. Until we have peacekeepers there won't be any ethnic cleansing. But the problem, they have failed. And for me, it was important to get a feedback that not at least an official level, because there were Russian diplomats, they were sitting there, also did a reference that, okay, let's not speak like Russia's MFA, do not use Russia's MFA wording. Let's have a frank discussion, as you invited frank discussion. That's really important to have the same perception of the process. Yes, they recognize that they failed to provide security guarantees, and I think cleansing happened in NK. For me, it was more important to ask a question related to their perception of Turkey, because what do we have in South Caucasus? One NATO member state is backing Azerbaijan, one state in the South Caucasus. Another NATO member state is going to back Armenia, the second state in the South Caucasus. But in case of Azerbaijan, there is no tough reaction from Russia. In case of Armenia, there is tough reaction. Why you have such misperception? Because both Turkey and NATO, maybe they are rivals, competitors, doesn't matter. Both of them are US allies, both of them are NATO members, and they are in the South Caucasus. From their perspective, they do not have any illusions that NATO is a part of West. But from their perspective, there is a difference. First, Turkey at least tried to play an independent role. France is not doing that. France is conducting all political West's plan of action plan. And second, France is not acting directly in order to collapse Russia. Turkey is not doing that. France is doing. As far as I understand, they have misperception, because there are a lot of places like South Caucasus and Middle East, I mean both Syria and North Africa, where there is a clash of interest between Turkey and Russia. But from that perspective, this is a natural competition. At the same time, France is acting directly against Russia. So this is their perception or misperception.
According to some Russian experts on the panel, Russia is currently conducting a policy of damage control with regard to Armenia. In other words, a passive policy. At the same time, I heard some experts who blamed Armenia itself for the worsening of the relations between the two countries, as you alluded to. But, on both of these questions, whether it is the lack of a more strategic policy, just damage control, just, make sure don't change anything, and also being able to really be introspective about Russia's role and what mistakes they may have made. Do you believe that any of the Russians recognize that what we have today may be the result of wrong Russian policies? Like, do they recognize that they have made mistakes and they want to fix it? Or are they saying basically that it's Armenia's fault and, we will no longer help Armenia if in case, let's say, Azerbaijan decides to attack as punishment? So, yes, they're not actively attacking Armenia, but they also alluded to the fact that Armenia may become Western Azerbaijan because Armenia is choosing NATO's side. Do you believe that Russia had some kind of a role in all of this over the last 5, 10 years?
That's an interesting question. My last point was we need such ally as Azerbaijan has. We need Turkey, but for Armenia. As far as I understand, Russia is not ready to be the same security provider as Turkey is for Azerbaijan, because at least you signed an aligned interaction agreement with the Azerbaijan. So you increase the level of your relation, at least on formal level. And they were very frank. They stated that, yes, we are not Turkey for you. We will not provide the same security guarantees, but at least we are able, so both they have political opportunity and capabilities to deter somehow Azerbaijan and Turkey. If you see another country, you're welcome. Obviously, we have Iran, but Russia has much more like toolkit to use against Azerbaijan. Coming to your question, there are two groups. First group that try to blame only Armenian side, but you elected Pashinyan, you supported this course, blah blah blah. And my counter argument is, I know, guys, that you were recommending to Russia to not support, for example, the opposition, because they were also officially stated that, okay, if Nicole is fine with Russian mediation, if Nicole is feeling his obligation, etc., why we should make a kind of U-turn or support Armenian opposition? This is why there was not any real support of Armenian opposition in 2021 elections. They accept this counter-argument. And there is another group that they accept that, yes, there is a lack of Russian strategy in the South Caucasus. And this is very frank. And I feel that they do not have really clear strategy until 2020. Because from their perception, yes, they have military presence in AK, and that's fine. But what's next? We have Aliyev's statement. He stated that we solve the conflict with Armenia, Azerbaijan will be ready to go deeper with Eurasian Economic Union. And they are living with this dream that Azerbaijan one day will become a member of Eurasian Economic Union. But we know that Azerbaijan will never join Eurasian Economic Union. Maybe they will sign a free trade zone agreement like Iran is doing, like India is discussing now. And maybe if Azerbaijan will face the loss of its sovereignty and will join the Eurasian Economic Union, but until there is no such tough situation, Azerbaijan will never join. And from their perspective, as far as I understand, okay, maybe today we may reduce our presence in NK, but next day we will get Azerbaijan in Eurasian Economic Union. And they are living with this dream. And my favorite example, maybe last time I was talking about it, the newly appointed Russian ambassador to Azerbaijan. He was head of first CIS department in Russian MFA for 12 years. First CIS department is responsible for integration in Eurasian space, including Eurasian Economic Union. So as they appointed this person as an ambassador to Azerbaijan, it means that this is number one priority. And they're ready to pay, as far as I understand, this price.
Okay, and to finish off our interview, Sergei, this week, Azerbaijan has increased its fake reports that Armenians are shooting at them. This is a common MO before Azerbaijan escalates the situation. We've seen that happen before. Meanwhile, in Munich, Pashinyan said that with Aliyev, they were able to reestablish all the previous commitments. Then, separately in interviews with media, he goes on to say that Azerbaijan wants to start a new war. So our question is, which is it? Are we headed towards peace or new military conflict? And if it's the latter, how likely is a new war, in your opinion?
We are really so far from the peace. According to our assessment, according to our Iranian colleagues' assessment, according to Russian colleagues' assessment, and according to Azerbaijani's colleague assessment, that they state in a private discussion. Everyone understands that there won't be peace deal in a short-term run. Azerbaijan is preparing for attack. As I mentioned, there are new cargoes with the military munition. There are military drills. Aliyev's visits of new military facilities in NK. Then we have high-level meeting between Azerbaijan MOD officials and Turkish MOD officials, etc., etc., etc. I mean, we have all indicators. Azerbaijan is preparing for any aggression, and the risk is quite high. The problem is they are also trying to find the best window of opportunity to do so, because they do not need peace deal until they are able to get everything step by step without peace deal. And Aliyev will use this opportunity. Maybe if it's not happened, for example, in coming weeks, maybe it will happen coming months, or maybe it will happen until the end of this year, when we have elections in EU, when we have elections in US, there will be elections also in Iran, etc., etc., etc.
All right, then we're going to leave it there today. Thank you, Sergei, for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei.
Merci, Shad.
That was our show, recorded on February 27, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Sergei Melkonian, who is an academic director at the Armenian Research Foundation. He served as assistant to President of Armenia Armen Sarkisyan on Russia and Middle East politics. Sergei is currently a research fellow at APRI Armenia and the Institute of Oriental Studies. He's also assistant professor at the Yerevan State University and the Russian-Armenian University. He is a co-founder of the Armenian Project NGO. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please find us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.